Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Terry White, Worldwide Design Evangelist for Adobe Systems, and it's my pleasure within the next little bit less than an hour to walk you through not only the brand new Creative Suite 6, but also how it integrates with Adobe Creative Cloud. Speaking of Creative Cloud, let me get a couple of things out of the way right off the bat. So, what is Creative Cloud? It's actually several things wrapped up under the umbrella of Creative Cloud from Adobe. So first and foremost, it's the same tools that you've known and loved over the years, such as Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, which we'll see today. It's new additional tools and services that are available only via Creative Cloud, such as Muse and Edge. And of course, our new touch apps. But let me make this clear is that no matter whether it's a new application or an existing application such as Photoshop, and whether you go with Creative Cloud or not, it's the same desktop applications that you've known and loved for years as far as you're running them on your desktop. Yes, you'll get great new features, but they're the applications that you would download whether Creative Cloud existed or not. So you're not running them over the cloud, you're not running them over the internet, you're not running them in a browser, you're actually launching Photoshop the way you did yesterday. All right, so with that out of the way, next, what else do you get? So there's Sync, Store, and Share, and this is basically the cloud part of Creative Cloud. So having your native Adobe files in the cloud if you choose to put them there, and syncing them across multiple devices with the desktop and PC sync. Also accessing those files with our touch applications. And of course, sharing those files if you choose to with others so that they can comment and download them. And of course, continuing with Adobe support. Also, Creative Cloud means publishing your content. So whether it's creating a website in Muse, using Business Catalyst to publish it, or Typekit to integrate with the great typography that's available now, or using the Digital Publishing Suite to create tablet applications. You will get these services as part of your Creative Cloud membership. And most importantly, and probably the thing that I'm most excited about as far as Creative Cloud is concerned, and that is we no longer have to wait 12 months, 18 months, 24 months to deliver new features. With the way that software works and the way that revenue recognition works, we can't always deliver software or deliver features to software that you previously purchased without having to charge for it. But now that it's a membership, now that it's Creative Cloud, we can deliver those features as soon as they're ready. So you no longer have to wait for a new thing to happen with your great application. You can get it as soon as it's available to us. All right, so with that said and with that out of the way, the next thing I'm going to do is actually go to one of these applications. Let's start with Photoshop. And as you see at the top, it is Adobe Photoshop CS6. I am running it on my desktop, even though it's connectable to Creative Cloud, but it's the same application that I would have gotten no matter what. All right, so Photoshop. And as you know, with Photoshop CS5, the previous version, we introduced quite a few new features, but we also introduced what we like to call magic, and that was our content-aware technology. With content-aware, we were able to have the computer figure out what should have been in an area that you would delete and have it fill it in for you. However, we also take a look from time to time at things that people have been doing and using the product for day in and day out and see if we can make improvements there as well. So with this version of Photoshop, the first thing you'll notice is the new, darker user interface. So we have the ability to customize the interface to be as light as it used to be, all the way down to a very dark or black interface so that your image becomes the center of attention, so that your eyes are not distracted by the interface. You're basically concentrating on the image you're working on. But of course, the user interface and speed improvements are not all that we did. If you take a look at something that most users do on a regular basis, something as simple as cropping. Well, the crop tool hadn't been touched in years. I mean, it was basically cropped an image and you clicked OK and you saved it. And then the next day your customer or client would say, oh, I didn't want you to crop off that part, and you'd cringe because if you didn't have an extra copy, it'd be too late. So I'm going to switch over to the new crop tool. And the first thing you'll notice is that, yes, I still have the ability to drag out a custom crop if I want, or I have the ability to simply drag in these handles. So this works very much like those of you who are using Lightroom. Yes, you can constrain it to a specific ratio, such as the original ratio or specific print sizes. You can save it as a preset, and you can even rotate the crop with keyboard shortcuts. So this is all great as far as an interface is concerned and the ability to pick up the image itself and move it within the cropped area. But the most important part of this, besides the user interface, is when I click OK, that's my new crop, and I get out of it, save it, come back tomorrow, and the customer says, oh, no, we wanted the top of the building to show. I don't have to cringe. I can come back to the crop tool, and I can uncrop. That's right. For the first time, Photoshop has the ability not to delete the crop pixels, basically a non-destructive crop. So whenever I want to uncrop the image, I can uncrop the image and get those pixels right back, even if I've saved and closed and quit the application. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop over to something else that users sometimes struggle with, especially if you're not one of the professional users, and that is the ability to adjust an image. We have so many ways to do it. I could use something as simple as brightness and contrast. I could use exposure. I could use levels. I could use curves. I can use a variety of different ways of adjusting the brightness of this image. However, one of the things that users tell us all the time is, well, why do you make me drag sliders? Why do you make me do 50 things to an image? Why can't I just click a button and have it be better? So the team spent a lot of time looking at things that could be one click away from better. So for example, under the image menu, under adjustments, where I have all those professional features such as levels, I don't have to worry about knowing what sliders to drag. There's an auto button. And while there was an auto button there before, we took a look at the math underneath each one of these features and said, can we do a better job with clicking auto? So when I click auto levels, I get a much better result than I did before with the prior auto levels or in the cases where there was no auto button at all. So give it a shot, and as I always like to do, when it's a case of a one-click button, I'll try it because the worst case scenario is I don't like it and I can undo it and go right back to the way I would have done it manually. But in most cases, if it's going to do it with one click, why not? All right, let's go to this next shot, which is a little bit of an issue here. There's a lot going on here. First of all, the photographer that took this took it with either a fisheye or a wide-angle lens. And not only is that the problem, but he took it and took 3 shots and combined them together as a panorama, which that's great, but we've got this giant curvature going on in our image, and while we get to see the entire room from left to right, we're seeing things that just are distorted that really shouldn't be that way. And that's typical of a fisheye lens because usually you want that kind of curved effect. But when you're doing architecture or room designs, that's not really representative of what the room really looks like. So let's fix it. Let's go up to our filter menu and come down to the brand new adaptive wide angle. And what I'm going to do here is, and of course this one can't be one click away because there's just too much going on. But what it has already done is it's identified what the photographer used, which camera and which lens. So Photoshop knows, based on profiles, what was used to take this photo. Therefore, it knows how to correct the photo based on some simple instructions. So, for example, I know this roof line should not be curved. So why don't I just click and start dragging? Now, I'm just dragging, but it's drawing that curved line for me. In other words, it's identified, hey, I know if you're dragging that this image is probably curved this way, and when you let go, I'm going to uncurve it for you. So, same thing here along the floor. I'm just dragging, and it's automatically snapping to the curvature of the image. And when I let go, it will begin to correct the image. Same thing here, starting at the top. If I just come down, it will auto correct and auto uncurve that area of the photo because it knows what happened in that photo based on the camera and the lens automatically. So I can continue working on this, continue straightening it out based on what's in the image, and Photoshop will continue to correct it accordingly. So I could spend, a little bit more time on that, getting that just right, but I think you get the idea. So when I click OK, that becomes our new image. We can then grab the crop tool and we can begin to either, let's drag out a crop this time. We'll just drag out a custom crop and right about there, click OK, and that becomes our new image. So a lot straighter, a lot more representative of what the image should be. And again, I wasn't finished, but you get the idea of just in a couple drags, I could get this image looking much better than it was before. Okay, so now let's move on to the next one here. And this is one of my favorite examples as I started talking earlier about the magic that was introduced in CS5 and taking that magic and putting it in different areas of Photoshop besides just ContentAware Fill. So, for example, we have this photo here, the two girls walking down the hill, and we've got this piece of equipment in the photo. This looks like either a reflector or a scrim or a light box or something. Whatever it is, it shouldn't be there. But the problem is it's on the edge of the photo. And typically I would get rid of something like this using the Photoshop CS5 patch tool. But when I patch something with the patch tool in CS5, so for example, let's go ahead and make our selection here. If it's on the edge, like it is here, the patch tool doesn't do a great job. So for example, if I just drag that over, it kind of starts leaving behind some of the white piece of that equipment because that's the way the patch tool did it if it was on the edge. If it's in the middle of the photo, anywhere along the inside of the photo, no problem. But if it's on the edge like that, it becomes an issue. So let's undo that and let's change the option here. In Photoshop CS6, we have the ability to turn on Content Aware for the patch. So now we have a Content Aware patch tool. And using the very exact same selection that I just made, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to drag it over to the same area that I did before and let go, and we get a much better patch result. And of course, we can switch back and forth between Content Aware and normal. If we see a little bit too much of a pattern, we can go ahead and continue correcting now that it's fixed the biggest area, which was on the edge. But that can get us a lot faster, a lot further, a lot faster than we could have before with the older patch tool. All right, so there we are. That's Content Aware Patch. And now let's talk about my favorite new piece of magic, and that is, again, along the same lines of Content Aware. I have a photo here that I took in Arizona. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pop back over to Bridge for a moment. And let's get out of this. And I'm going to show you exactly where that photo was taken. It's taken right here on the edge of Horseshoe Bend. And as a matter of fact, if you look down here at the bottom area of the image, that's the cliff we were actually standing on. So as you can see, there's no guardrail, no fence, no security person saying step back. If you walk too far, you're gone. So let's go back to Photoshop. And as you can see, I had the model stand way back here so that if there was any kind of gust of wind or trip or anything, she might fall on a rock and hurt herself, but she's not going to be on the edge and fall over. However, I would have loved her to stand on the edge to take a better photo, but I was never going to chance that. So now I can do it after the fact. Let's go in and move her. First of all, let's make a selection. And we'll use the quick select that was introduced in CS4. And the quick select, as the name implies, is quick. Not necessarily accurate, but it is the quick selection tool. So while I wouldn't try and use this to extract hair, it's definitely good for selecting an image like this. All right, so now I've got that selection made, and of course it selected what it saw. I'm going to expand that selection out just a bit. Let's go to our expand here. And we'll expand that out by about 6 pixels, just making it a little bit bigger so we get some of the sky, some of the rock, some of the other areas to work with. Now we'll switch over to a brand new tool. This is new inside of Photoshop CS6. It is the ContentAware Move tool. So in the past, I might have been able to duplicate her and put her on her own layer and move her over, but then I'd still have the chore of filling her back in with ContentAware Fill. So as you can see, there is no extra layer. We're dealing with just the background here, and I'm going to go in and pick her up and move her over to the edge of the cliff where I did not want her to stand. And when I let go, Photoshop will figure out what used to be there, replace it, and put her down where I wanted her to be. So as you can see, quick, easy, content-aware move is going to be great for these kinds of things. If we go back to our original photo, we could do the same thing here. We'll grab our quick select. Let's say we wanted to take the girl here, select her, and there we go. And we'll do a little bit of, again, grabbing a little bit more of the area here. We'll do an expand, and let's do that by, let's say, 4 pixels. We'll use our content-aware move, and we'll move her to this area of the hill. And content-aware move does exactly what it's supposed to. Filled in the other area, and complete with the building behind her, put her over here with this building behind her, and filled it in nicely. So that's the magic that we talk about when we talk about content aware and having that technology expand it to other areas of our Photoshop product. So now let's move on to this particular photo where we have our designer, Alice Ritter. And while the photographer did a good job, kind of putting her in the center of the photo, what I don't like is there's too much attention being drawn to other people. Like, for example, this guy's walking in front of the camera, and your eye is going to constantly go over here and say, well, who is he? What's he carrying? What's on his hat? What's on his jacket? What's this guy? Is this guy's feet, or is he carrying something? You're just going to constantly look over here instead of the subject. However, if I go to Mini Bridge, and I go to another photo that's similar, this particular one is done right. She's in the center again, the focus is on her, but everybody else is still there. Even this guy walking in front of the camera is out of focus. So your eye instinctively keeps going back to the area that's in focus. Now that's great, but that's easy to do in the camera. It's called depth of field. But what happens when you didn't shoot it that way? In this case, it wasn't shot that way. This guy's in focus. So we've had all kinds of technologies in Photoshop to blur an image and, kind of fake it and do it, the way we do it afterwards in the past. But it's much, much easier, much, much better now in Photoshop CS6. So I'm going to go to my filter menu under blur, where I have 3 brand new blur filters from our blur gallery. We have the tilt shift blur, the iris blur, and the filled blur. So I'm going to go to the iris blur. And as the name implies, it gives me an iris shape, and I can pick this up and move it around. And I got all these great sliders over here to kind of control it, but I like the fact that Photoshop now gives me more options to edit directly on canvas. So I can do all my controls right here. I can say that, well, it's too out of focus for everything else. Let's dial it down. So I just dial it down a little bit and get just the right amount of blurring on the edges here. I can also say, no, I don't want it to go out that far. Let's pull it in some. Let's tilt it. Let's get it right on her. And again, maybe dial down the out of focus parts just a little bit more so that he's out of focus but not completely blurred out. All right, now next, in the other photo, there was a picture of a bus behind her, or a bus behind her. And that bus, you could actually read what was on top of it. So I'd like to be able to read this sign and maybe even this sign. And that's the part that's impossible inside of a camera. You can't pick and choose multiple areas to be in focus and multiple areas to be out of focus. It's one or the other. Well, in Photoshop, I can now do what I couldn't do in the camera. Just by simply adding another focus point, I can say, you know what? I want that area in focus too. And you know what? I want that area in focus too. And I can keep adding these focus points, getting the areas in focus that I want in focus, keeping everything else out of focus. So I can do the kinds of things that I've always wanted to do that photography or cameras just won't allow me to do. And even if you're not a photographer, let's say you're in advertising, this is going to allow you to draw your potential reader's eye directly into the area of the photo that you want them to concentrate on. So, what's next? Well, I'm going to pop over to a video, and I'm going to play this video, and we're going to talk about it. Now, why video? Well, you can't buy a camera today that doesn't shoot video. Every camera, whether it's point and shoot, all the new DSLRs, just about any kind of camera you buy does video. So we have all these people shooting video for the first time. What are they doing with all that video? And chances are very little or nothing. Because if you're not a video professional, chances are you're not going to go out and spend a lot of money on professional tools to do it. Well, and that's, by the way, one of the great benefits of Creative Cloud is that you would get access to those tools without having to pay the traditional upfront cost to get them. But aside from that, people are typically scared of video tools if they don't do video because of the interface. But what if you already know the interface? Let's say Photoshop. You already know how to use Photoshop. What if Photoshop could be your video editing tool for non-video pros? So let me switch over to this image. I'm going to switch over to a different workspace. And this workspace is built in. It's the motion workspace. I'm also going to expand my timeline out just a bit here. What if I told you that entire video you just saw was created 100% inside Photoshop? There was no Premiere, no After Effects, nothing else. That was all Photoshop layers. So Photoshop, since I believe CS4 could bring in video clips, it could combine them with stills, it can add type, but the interface just wasn't intuitive. So the Photoshop team went in, took a look at the interface. How could they make video editing better inside Photoshop? And they've accomplished it. This is the Photoshop video editing that I've always wanted. So first and foremost, I get a timeline that I could actually scrub through and watch my video, see how this is all working together. And again, these are part video, audio, and still images. And all of this is just simply layers in your layers panel. So I just went to that layer or clicked on it, and it showed me the layer inside the layers panel, which, by the way, not only can you name your layers like you always did, but you now have the ability to search your layers or pick specific kinds of layers to look for. You can search for them by name as well. So we added layer searching directly to the layers panel. But now that I've got this layer and I can see this one is an actual video clip, I want to do something to that video clip. I want to add a special effect. Well, the thing is, don't treat it like a video clip. Treat it like a still. So if I grab this still or video clip and I convert it into a smart object, smart objects aren't new, you've had those for years. And now that it's a smart object, I'm going to go to my filter menu, treat it just like a still, and I'm going to run the fine edges filter on it. And there it is. Now that's what would happen to the still image. However, this is video. So if I put the playhead back and play it, that's actual video of that effect being applied instantly. And with the new Mercury graphics performance, I can actually see it play in just about real time depending on your hardware. So your results may vary depending on your hardware. All right, so now let's go in, and what if I want to add a transition? These are the kinds of things that were not intuitive or not easy. So I want that video to fade out to white before it starts going to the stills. So we have our transitions right here, where I can just simply grab the fade with white and drag it right onto the clip. And that's it. It's done. So now I can play that back, and it will fade out to white before it starts going to the stills. And of course, we have transitions all the way up to the type and the slow fade out at the end. Once you're done with your video editing, you just simply export it using the render video feature, and you can export it out to whatever video format you want, share it on Facebook, send it to people, put it on YouTube, do whatever you want to do with your video, give it to a client, whatever you need to do. So Photoshop video editing, for the first time, it's now a reality for people that have never done video before. All right, so now let's move over and let's talk about my Creative Cloud. So I've got Creative Cloud going here. I'm in my web browser, and I've got some images that I've uploaded. These are my own personal images that I've uploaded to Creative Cloud. So if it's an image and I want to click on it here, this is a particular Photoshop file. I can even show the layers right here in the browser and turn layers on and off and work with those layers directly in the web browser in my Creative Cloud client. I can even download the swatches from Cooler and work with those as well. So just simply previewing files in Creative Cloud is very easy, as we can see. But what if I want to actually now leave? I want to leave the office and I want to take this work with me. So we already know it's in the cloud. So let's go ahead and switch over to my iPad. This is actually my iPad, my new iPad running live here. So what you won't be able to see my fingers, but what you will see is as I interact with this in Adobe Photoshop Touch. So I've left the office, my tablet's connected to the internet. I have the ability to go in and create a new project down here at the bottom right. And I can grab photos that are local on the device. That's great. I can also grab those same Creative Cloud photos. So no matter where I am, I have access to my images, access to my files. I can take pictures with the device and use them. I can do a Google search and search for royalty-free images that I can use in my project directly in Photoshop Touch. I can also use my Facebook images. So I'm going to grab this boardwalk image on the upper right here and add it to my project. So it's downloading it from Creative Cloud. It's now local on my iPad here. And the next thing I'm going to do is add another layer. So I'll go to my layers in the lower right. I'm going to add a new photo layer. And once again, I can grab another Creative Cloud image. So for example, I'll grab the model there. We'll add that one in. And now that I've got these two layers, I can, of course, scale this down, move it around, click Done. But the problem is it's got its own background. It's got its original background from when I took this in the studio. So what we're trying to do is composite her jumping on the boardwalk here. So let's go in and let's do some selecting. So I have all kinds of tools that some of which we're used to in Photoshop, such as the brush, the clone stamp, the eraser, the blur tool. But I've got some selection tools here. One of which, of course, the magic wand we're used to, the brush selection tool, which is kind of new, but we also have the scribble selection tool. So in a case like this, I can say, you know what? There are areas of this photo that I want to keep, and I can just simply scribble in those areas with my finger. Okay, and once I get that area scribbled in, the next thing I want to do is I want to tell it areas that I don't want to keep by simply using the remove feature. So I'll just simply say, you know what, I don't want any of this background. So we'll just scribble that in. And now, because I've given it those two parameters, it's already made a selection based on that. So I can continue to refine that area and say, nope, don't want more of the gray. Yes, want more of the person, but you get the idea. And at a certain point, you're going to reach a point of no return where your fingers are too big. So let me zoom in just a little bit here and tell it that I don't want some of that area around the gray. And the other problem is that she's got hair. And of course, the gray is showing through the hair on the back there. So I've done as much as I can do with those tools. And if I were in Photoshop, I'd have my great refine edge features that we introduced in CS5. Oh wait, I am in Photoshop. I'm in Photoshop Touch. So let's go to refine edge under this menu. And from here, I can see how bad that selection would have been if I didn't have refine edge. So let's go ahead and just do a selection here going through the hair. and we can just have it refine that selection down and start doing a better job in the areas where we don't want so much of the gray. All right, and I think you get the idea there. And once I've got my selection refined, I can go ahead and say OK. That will give me the better selection, and now all I have to do is simply say extract. So we'll extract that from the background. We'll zoom out a little bit there using a little pinch command, and we'll go ahead and deselect. And now we'll use our move tool, and we can of course size this down even more. She would have been a little smaller there, jumping in the air. And we can say done. And of course we can, let's undo that. There we go. Go back to our move tool. And what I'm going to do here is, well, we know that's layers. We can see the layers panel. But of course, taking advantage of some of that magic, I'm going to double click on the layers, and we can look at those layers in 3D. So pretty cool to be able to just have a fluid interface like this directly on my tablet to kind of show a client what kind of work went into their files by showing some of this off in 3D. All right, so now that we've done that, I can go in, if I can turn off my 3D there, and I can now go back and save this project, and I can upload it back to the Creative Cloud. Once I upload it back to the Creative Cloud, I could then work on it again in Photoshop Touch or in full Photoshop. Photoshop will be able to open these files and work with them directly. So that is where I can start a project in Photoshop Touch and continue it on the desktop or vice versa. All right, we could spend all day talking about Photoshop, but then I wouldn't get to some of my other favorite tools such as Illustrator, InDesign, and more. So we're in Adobe Illustrator CS6, and what did Illustrator get? Well, Illustrator got a lot of work under the hood. It's now a 64-bit application. It's now it takes advantage of the same UI features that Photoshop got. It's faster, it's Cocoa on the Mac, it's all the things you wanted Illustrator to be under the hood. But now let's take a look at some of the things that are on the surface, some of the things you'll want to interact with. Well, I have my artboards here, so this is a multiple page or multiple artboard document. I'm going to double click to number 4, and you know what? I used to make jokes about how you had to rename an artboard by going to a certain panel to do it. Now you can just double click and rename the artboards. So, sometimes it's the little things, but that's one of those things that just drove me crazy in the previous versions. All right, so now that I've got this artboard in place, I have a photo of some leaves here. I'm just going to select that. And I would love to use leaves in the pattern for my fashion design. But I don't want to have hundreds of pixels and photos and things going on. It's just going to bog down the work, going to print slower, plus it will be resolution dependent. Illustrator is vector, resolution independent, therefore I want to take advantage of that. So I need to convert these leaves, that's a photo, into vectors. And we had Live Trace, and Live Trace was great, but this is 2012, so it's time for a brand new tracing engine, built from the ground up as 64-bit as well. So right here I'm in my image trace panel. I'm just going to simply choose one of the presets. I can, for example, do low fidelity photo. And within a matter of seconds, it is giving me not only a better result than I ever would have gotten with Live Trace, it's giving me fewer paths, fewer points to make a great trace. So right now, that in and of itself is vector. It copied the color information, it got everything it needed to make that a vector image. But what if I don't want it to be the same color? Let's say I want it to be shades of gray. So I can choose shades of gray, and it will take the color out and basically make it a grayscale vector. So quickly and easily tracing things and making them into vectors. Well, that's cool too, but I kind of want to make my own thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want it to be silhouettes. So just basically convert it to a black and white. As you can see, that happens very quickly. And now we'll go ahead and expand that so I can get down to the actual pixel, or not, I want to say pixels, the actual vectors that it created. I can double click on those vectors and drill down into the actual paths themselves. and I can then begin to fill those paths with whatever colors I want to use. All right, so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and drop the opacity down. Again, we're working with a brand new vector. We can do whatever we want. And let's scale that down a bit. And what I want to do now is start my pattern creation. So I've got that scaled down. I've got it to look the way I want it to look. And now what I want to do is go to a new workspace that I created called Pattern Making. And in that workspace, I'm going to go up to Object, Pattern, and Make. And that will give me my new pattern, which is very simple. But let's go ahead and make it a little bit more than what we see here. So I'm just going to hold down my Option or Alt key. And I didn't mean to zoom in there. Zoom out a little bit. There we go. Hold down my Option and Alt key, Option or Alt key, and just drag this. So we'll duplicate it. And again, we're having live patterns being generated in Illustrator on the fly, something that our previous version just wouldn't have been fast enough to do. So we can change the color of that one. We can also rotate it around. And again, it's doing this all live right in front of you, so you get instant feedback on what your new pattern is going to look like. I can continue duplicating that, continue working with it, size this one down, make that one a little smaller, make this one a little bigger, whatever I want to do, and continue updating my pattern. Once I'm done, I can name this pattern. We're going to say it's Ask a Pro 2. And now that I've named it, I'm just going to say that I'm done making my pattern. And we return right back to where we were. But then I'm going to go over here to the next artboard where I've got some clothing that's been outlined. I'm going to select it, and you can guess what I want to do. I want to fill it with my new pattern. So quickly and easily, pattern design, not only for objects in Illustrator, but also things that, like your website, you know, how hard is it making a pattern that looks great for your web page? So that's one of the many new capabilities inside Illustrator. Let's take a look at another one. So I'm going to switch over to this document where I've got these kind of cool looking gradients going on here. And if we look at it in artwork mode, they're just simple vectors. Anyone can draw these. They're just simple squiggles, simple swirls that anyone can do. But why do they look so cool? Why do they look so three-dimensional there? Well, let's take a look at how this feature works. So I'm going to switch over to a blank document. We'll grab something simple like a spiral tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and create my spiral. And we'll just move that in to about there on the page. Great. And I'm going to change the weight of it to, let's say, 20 points. So now this is nothing new. You could have done this before. But what is new is now that I go to the actual stroke, I have the ability for the first time inside of Illustrator to choose a gradient stroke. So I can choose it to have it apply many different ways. I can have it go around from one color to the end to the other color. I can have it, go the opposite way. I can have it go across the object. So as it's crossing the object itself, going from light to dark. So whatever I want. And of course, I can pick between different kinds of gradients, mix my own multi-gradients if I want. And I can apply as many different looks and feels as I want. But that in and of itself is not enough. What I want to do is combine it with the width tool that we introduced inside CS5. And now what this will give me the ability to do is have variable width strokes inside my new gradient stroke. So that's how you took those simple swirls and created that kind of three-dimensional fat going thin, going fat look again, just by using variable widths. So I imagine your logos are going to get a lot better now than they ever were before using some of this new technology. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and again, I could spend all day on Illustrator, all day on Photoshop, but then I wouldn't get to one of my other favorite products, which is InDesign. So InDesign, a little bit over 10 years old now. Illustrator, a little bit over 25 years old now. And we keep finding fantastic new things to do with these products. So what's new in InDesign? Well, InDesign, as you know, 10 years ago, it was all about print. and it still is for a lot of people about print. But we also realize that this is no longer just a print world. It's a world where you're having to create documents for print, for the web, and for digital publishing. And in many cases, even if you're doing a document just for print, your customer wants different versions of it or different variations. So let's take this simple document that's nice and tall, and let's say your customer said, hey, I want my brochure to be wide this time. Well, okay, I'm in my page tool. I see the tall and wide icons here. Oh, you want it wide? No problem. I'll just switch it to be wide. Oh, yeah, InDesign turns the page for you, but you're on your own with the content. So now as a designer, you have the drudgery, which, it's kind of drudgery, but satisfaction at the same time. We want the control to redesign it to be wide the way we want it to look. But we don't want to have to do all the work. We don't have to do, touch every single piece to just turn it wide or just to make it smaller or just to make it bigger. So let's go back to tall and let's take a look at some new things that we have. We're going to start off with liquid layouts. So I'm in the page tool, which we introduced in CS5, but the page tool kind of got its own little liquid flavor here. So now I can click on a page and I can actually liquefy the page. I mean, as I drag the page, it will resize and reshape. And again, the content's not doing anything. But now with my new liquid rules, I have 4 ways to have the content automatically adjust. So let's go to the simplest one first, scale. Everyone gets scale. Just make it bigger or smaller. So if you were just making a page a little smaller or a little bigger, your content will now scale accordingly. That's cool. Until you need to go something like that. Because now it's scaling, but it's still not reflowing the content. You're back to where you were. So scale is good for quick, limited things, but not the answer for drastic changes. All right, what's recenter? Recenter is not even as good as scale. It's just basically keep the content in the center no matter what you do. Don't scale it, just keep it in the middle. So that's, again, going to be very limited use as to what you're going to need that for. Where the real magic lies inside of this feature are in the last 2. You have guide-based and object-based. I'm going to save object-based for last because that's my favorite. So let's go to guide-based first. So when you're in the page tool, you have special guides that you can pull out. And when you cross the intersection of content, so for example, this guide that I just pulled out is vertically crossing the background image and the logo and the A. It's not touching the Alice Ritter text. And I only drug out a vertical one. So now when I move the page, it allows me to adjust the content this way, but not this way, not up and down, just across, because I only drug out the one guide. If I now drag out the second guide horizontally and have it intersect with all 3 of those same pieces, now I get the ability to have it go both up and down depending on what I need to do within limits, because of course if I go down too far, it's going to start cropping the logo. And again, guide-based is not as flexible as the next thing we're going to do, but it's pretty easy and pretty quick to get it going to do this. All right, so now let's undo the guides, and let's go to my favorite one, which is object-based. And object-based means that now you can go in on specific objects and dictate, will it be sized? Will it stay in place? Will it be pinned? Will it auto-fit? Will it auto-crop? What will it do? So on an object-by-object basis, you can set the rules for what will happen. So now that I'm on object-based, when I select my page, I get the best of both worlds. I get the ability to reflow, resize, reshape my page, and my content will automatically adjust to the new layout. That is going to give you the ultimate control. Now, with that said, do I still have to create all these second and third and fourth documents with the new layouts? How about if we take a look at the Pages panel and we take a look at a brand new feature that works hand in hand with Liquid Layout, and it's called alternate layouts. So this particular example was created for digital publishing. That's an iPad example. But as you saw, I could have just as easily made that a print example. So I've got my iPad vertical version, with all my pages that are vertical, look great, fantastic. But now I want the wide version, and this is where the pain would have come in the past. I'd have to duplicate the document, save it as a wide version, turn all the pages, readjust all the content, and have 2 documents to manage. But now inside of InDesign, I have the ability to go up to my layout menu, create an alternate layout. It auto-detected that it was tall, so it figures I want to make the next one wide, but I don't have to. I don't have to make it for iPad. I can make another tall version for Android, or a tall version for iPhone or Kindle, or a letter version for print, or an A4 version for international, or a custom size. I can do whatever I want. So now that I've got the iPad wide version, click OK, and it creates the alternate layout in the Pages panel directly next to the original layout. So I get the best of both worlds here in the document. And again, as the designer, you're still going to want to go through every single page and tweak things that may, tweak things that may have moved that shouldn't have moved the way they did based on alternate layouts. So you're still going to need to tweak. This is not going to be perfect on every single page. But as the designer, you're going to want that control anyway, and I'm done. So now that's that page versus that page. So you get the idea, go through each page and check it after you've created your alternate layout, but that's a lot less work than having to do it all up front and resize everything. And you're not limited to just 2. So for example, I can create another alternate layout. And this time we're going to make our Android, which is a 16:9 aspect ratio, tall version. Click OK. And now there's my Android version of the tall page. So we'll zoom out a little bit. There it is. And again, it may need some tweaking. I can see that I probably want to pull that in a little bit. And as the designer, you get to do those last final checks to make sure it looks the way you want it to look, but without having to go through and touch every single piece just to get it to look the way you want it. So that is creating alternate layouts and using liquid layouts inside of InDesign CS6. Now let's pop over to another document here. And in this particular case, we've got a document that's almost done. So the first page is done. Second page is done. Third page is not done. So let's zoom in on it and see what it is. Wait, this is starting to look like a form. Oh my God, it's a form. Well, forms are great. All you want to do in InDesign CS5 is print them. But if you want this form to be fillable, in CS5 on down, that would mean making a PDF, then taking it over to Acrobat and adding all the form fields. And of course, the minute you do that, the client's going to change their mind and say, no, move something around, change something, do something, and then you're going to have to start the process all over again. What if you could just simply take your type tool, create a new frame where name is supposed to be typed. Once you get that new frame in place, you can of course adjust it as you see fit, but then go to our brand new Buttons and Forms panel and create a new text field with all the same options that you would have inside of Acrobat right here inside of InDesign. So now for the first time, InDesign can be your form authoring tool, where you're not only designing the form, but you're making a real form that someone can not only fill out, but they can even go as far as submitting. So there's a submit button here, and that submit button will actually submit the form via email to the person that you designate when you're designing the form. All right, now, what does that really mean? So once I export out the PDF, here it is inside of Acrobat so we can see it. Anyone with a free Adobe Reader, even on mobile devices, would be able to not only get to this form, but they would be able to then click and start typing and filling out the form as they would inside of Acrobat without having to be a PDF expert or designer. So I'm basically clicking, filling out things, telling it who I am, about me. I'm a designer, let's say for today. I get to fill out my brand, my title, and then once I'm all said and done, filling out the form, I can either reset it, getting rid of all the information, submit it via email, and or print it. So that was all designed directly inside of InDesign without having to do any of that legwork inside of Acrobat. Okay, so more, there's more we can do inside of InDesign. Let me show you one more thing, actually. I will take a few moments to do this, even though I'm running low on time and I do want to get to one more product, but let's take one more second to do one more thing. And that is we're on, here, let's go to our pages panel here. Let's go to this page. We're on page 2 of the iPad layout, and I'm going to add in another page. So let's just add in another page to that layout. And now we've got a blank page. And what I'd love to do is take some of this content, or maybe some content here, and add it to a new document. And of course, we know we can copy and paste. You can select all of this and copy and paste, but then you'd have to copy, paste, and relay out. What if you had a way of doing this to where you can selectively choose what you want and lay it out as you go? Something similar to having the best of both worlds, where you're designing as you go, but you know where all the content is because you got it from another document. So let's go in and use our brand new content collector tools. So the content collector, once I click on this tool, brings up the new conveyor. And here's where I can go and start collecting things. So I want that logo, that text, that picture, and I can go to other pages, other documents, and continue collecting. Once I've got everything collected, then I have the ability in the conveyor to switch it over from a collector to a placer, and I can go to any other InDesign document or any other page inside of an InDesign document, and I have the ability now to say place and remove from the conveyor, place multiple times and keep it in the conveyor, or place it and keep it in the conveyor and then load the next object. So any choice that I want. So this first choice that's on by default means once I place this, it will be gone from the conveyor. I'd have to go recollect it again. But let's go ahead and scroll up here, and the ability here, as opposed to copy and paste, is I get to place that as big or as small as I want. I get to put this text wherever I want it to be. I get to put this text wherever I want it to be. So I can, again, click and drag and have that go wherever I want that. I get to place this photo wherever I want the photo to be. So I get to redesign that layout based on my new placing using the conveyor, and have it flow whichever way I want, from document to document, from page to page, and there's even the ability of having it be linked content. So for example, if I recollect that logo, when I go to place that, I can create a link to that logo so that if the logo ever changes on one page, it will automatically change on another page. And of course, logos already do that when you place them, but text does not. So I have the ability to go in and grab text and then place that text as a linked object, so that, here we'll do the text there, so that we'll go out here, for example, we'll place the text, should have made that bigger, let's do that. And once I place it, it's got a link on it. I see the little link icon. And now if I go in and make a change, so for example, I go to self-reinvention and call it self-motivation, it now tells me that the link is out of date, and I have the ability to update the link everywhere I've used that and update the text. So whether it's in the same InDesign document or multiple InDesign documents, linked content, whether you use it with the conveyor or not, is a new possibility inside of InDesign. Okay, so now let's move on. Let's go on to my last product here, Adobe Muse. I've got just a few minutes left to talk about Muse. So what is Muse? Well, as you know, Adobe has a tradition, long-standing tradition, of providing some of the best web and video tools on the market. So Dreamweaver is our professional web authoring tool for people that do code, that people that wake up every day and that's their job, is to design websites. But what if you're just a designer? What if you don't do code? What if you are afraid of code, never want to learn code, but you do have the occasion of wanting to create a website? That's what Muse is for. Muse is your product because it's basically built by the same engineers that built InDesign. So you get the same kind of look and feel as an InDesign document. but you're actually creating websites. You get the same features. So for example, I'm in a Muse document where it's just the simple master page, just like an InDesign, and one document page, which would be the home page. So if I double click on the master page, I have the ability to choose a background or a fill. I can choose a color. I'm going to just go with a darker gray there. And once I've got that color, I also have the ability to choose an image for my browser fill. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose an image here. And we'll just bounce out of that one and we'll choose our background. There we go. So now, just as quickly and easily as choosing and placing, just like I would inside of InDesign, if we go back to the actual document here, I've done it on the master, therefore it will be on all of my web pages until I make a change. So I can go in and create pages, I can create links, I can add content, I can do whatever I want. So this is the contacts page, this would be the products page. You get the idea, and then you would start laying out the things you want on each of those pages. Well, since I only have a couple minutes, let me go back to a site that's actually more advanced, further ahead in the design process. This one has two masters, one master specifically for the home page, and then another master for all the other document pages. And on that home page, what I'm going to do is double click on it. As you can see, it's got navigation. It's got a logo, it's got some text here, or another logo, it's got the background image, and I want to simply place a graphic here. So we'll just go to our file menu, just like we would in InDesign. We'll do a place, and we'll grab the letter B. And I get the place gun just like I would in InDesign, so I can size it, I can click, and place that and move it around anywhere I want that to be on my web page. If I want to preview this, I can preview it right here inside of Muse because Muse has the WebKit engine built in. So we're seeing this and we're seeing our rollovers. We're seeing this work the way it would work if it were actually on the web. We'll go to our design feature here. The next thing I want to do is I want to add some type. And this is actually a new thing inside of Muse, the final release that's going to be in Creative Cloud, is you could do type before, but as you know, or maybe you don't, when you're working with print, you have the ability to do type any way you want. Any fonts you want to use, no problem. Put them in, print them, save it as a PDF. Your client sees it, great. But when it comes to the web, here are your fonts. Arial, Cosmic Sans, Courier New, so forth and so on. These are the fonts that everyone has built into their browsers, if they have a modern browser. Well, what if you want to use something other than those? Well, in the past with Muse, you could access any of your fonts, but as you can see, what would happen is when you export out your site, it's going to export out any other fonts as images. So then you get into issues where it's not searchable, you get into issues where you have to do alt tags and all kinds of other things go on to make that work, and they couldn't select it and copy it as text. However, new inside of this is the ability to add web fonts using Typekit, which is a company we acquired. And this technology is great when you want to create that special look, that special, one piece of text that's in a custom font and have it still be text. So I could use, for example, the Aquafina font or script. Click OK on that. I can then type my text. Thank you for attending. Select it, and we'll go back to our font list now, where I now have that Aquafina font, and we can make that bigger. Okay, using the same InDesign commands, and this page would actually render and be selectable as text. And again, the user would not have to have that font installed to be able to see it when I publish this on the web. Speaking of publishing, I have the ability to export it out as HTML and upload it to whatever service I want, or publish it directly to your Business Catalyst account, which comes with your Creative Cloud membership. Last but not least, we'll take a look at one more thing, and then I think we're out of time. I'm going to go to this page where I've got a slideshow. And here, let me show you the slideshow first. When we go to preview, this is something photographers ask me all the time. I want to create a website with a slideshow of my images. This was done in Muse. There's a slideshow widget. Just drag it on the page, add your images, you're done. All right, but I want to add an image to that, which of course photographers, they pay someone to do a website, but then it's hard to get someone to update that website every time they want to update it. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to turn on the thumbnails for this particular site. Here, let me get rid of that. Turn on the thumbnails. There we go. And so the thumbnails are showing me all the images that are loaded there. And of course, I can click, see them, and I can remove them, move them around, do what I want, and add more. So I can choose place, just like I would my regular place command. We can grab that shot that I did at Horseshoe Bend, and we can go ahead and just drop that in wherever we want it to be, and it will add it in. And of course, we can, again, move it in the order we want it in. And once we're done, we can say that we want to turn off thumbnails because we don't need them anymore. We can preview the page once again, and the slideshow will start automatically because that's what it's set to do. And once we get to our third image, voila, it was just that easy for me to add an image and put it in place where I wanted it to be. And I did all that without having to write a single line of code because I don't want to write code. I did that years ago. Don't want to do it anymore. All right, so there you have it. Adobe Muse, part of the Creative Suite, Creative Cloud membership. And you get 5 Business Catalyst websites that you can host with us directly. But if you don't want to host with us, you can export out your site as HTML. And I'm officially 2 minutes and 50 seconds over, so I'm going to stop here.